Thank you so much, Councilwoman, for agreeing to talk with us about the National Western Complex and the new center. Let's go ahead and start off by talking about what your relationship is with the National Western Complex, the National Western Center, and how that relates to you and your role with in city government and so forth.
So I have a very long history with the National Western. Going back to when I was a staff member to Sal Carpio, who was the councilman of that district. So that goes back to 1979, which probably way predates you being born. But so as a staff person, I had the opportunity to interface with National Western. And then after Sal Carpio decided not to run, I ran and got elected and served in that district for 16 years. And then when I was term limited, I decided to come back after sitting out 2 terms and ran for an at-large seat and have been very involved with National Western, you know, going back to when they went before the voters to ask for more funding. And one important point I think that I need to make is when I came back on the council in 2011, a decision had been made by the then mayor, who was an interim mayor, Bill Vidal, who had been urged by some folks to have National Western join in partnership with Gaylord, which was going to be way out by the airport in Aurora. And every member of council came together and signed a letter that was sent to Mayor Hancock, because he had just been elected, and said, we're not supportive of this. And there had been a long-term contract in place between the city and National Western. And we all said, we're not going to let them out of that contract. And that would have had to happen in order for, you know, there to be the approvals for them to move to Gaylord. And so all 13 of us signed a letter saying, get us out of this situation. We need to work on keeping National Western in Denver. So then we began having some very serious conversations about what did that really look like in terms of, you know, just making sure that there was a solid commitment to keep them here. And then, you know, then we went to the ballot and asked for funding to do. So there was a whole master planning process that was put together that had multiple phases. And the request to the voters was to do phase 1 and phase 2. And those are some of the new buildings that are under construction and will be opening soon. Phase 3 and 4 was not funded. So that's what is on the ballot today that will be going before the voters, is to ask for funding to build some of those additional buildings. And in the entire process, there was very robust community engagement, and a lot of the verbiage that is in those documents came from that community engagement. So when City Council was asked to move to put 2 buildings from phase 3 and 4 on the ballot, basically, I went through the documents working with the mayor's office and the people from the National Western Authority and extracted out all of those community agreements that said we're going to do these things for the GES, Global Elyria Swansea neighborhoods. And what I was able to do is get the mayor and the president of City Council to sign a letter just reiterating their commitment to those community commitments spelled out in the framework agreement, in the master plan, in the 1909 building. There was a study done that talked about the whole community engagement process. So that sort of gives you a long history from beginning to where we are today.
I have a couple of follow-up questions for you on
Sure.
the things you mentioned. First of all, why was it so important for it to stay in Denver?
Well, it's always been a Denver icon, and people identify the stock show with Denver, not Aurora or some other part of the state. And yes, it engages people from all across the state when they have their annual stock show. But, you know, the request that was being made to the state asking for funding was to look at turning National Western into more of a year-round destination attraction with lots of different kinds of activities that are not solely focused on agriculture and rodeos and that kind of stuff. And there will probably be more of those throughout the year, but you know, there will be the opportunity for concerts and for CSU to look at, you know, bringing conventions here, because as you know, they're focused on addressing world hunger and looking at, you know, water issues. So it lend itself much better to remaining in the center city, the capital city of the state, versus allowing it to move.
Wonderful, thank you. And then you also mentioned that there were commitments made in this whole process to the residents and communities of Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea.
Right.
What were some of those commitments, and why were those made?
So part of it goes back to, you know, these being neighborhoods that have always felt left out of city engagement around lots of different things. I mean, there's some of our remaining neighborhoods that still don't have curb, gutter, and sidewalks. There have been efforts to help address part of that, but it takes time and money to bring them up to the same standard as all the rest of our neighborhoods across the city that have that basic infrastructure. So, you know, part of the commitment was to look at how to help make those neighborhoods whole, if you will. You know, so jobs was a big part of it, creating entrepreneurial opportunities, looking at some of the gaps. So the connectivity between National Western and the three neighborhoods, and making sure that there is that connection along 48th Avenue, which is, you know, right access to the light rail station that's on the National Western campus. Another piece of it is a commitment to fully engage the community before any development is proposed to happen on what is known as the triangle. So the triangle includes some of the land east of the railroad tracks on the National Western campus, north of I-70, where, you know, some of these new buildings were proposed to be built, and the Coliseum property, which is about 30 acres. And in the master plan, what it called for was the Coliseum to still be under sort of the management of arts and venues until a new building is built that replaces the Coliseum. And then at that point, the Coliseum becomes part of the portfolio, if you will, of the assets that make up the National Western campus. And so I think you're aware that the city attempted to find a private developer using the public-private partnership process, known as the P3 process, to basically look at building the two buildings that are going to now be on the November ballot. And in exchange for that, they would be given the 30-acre campus to redevelop. And that, you know, would have involved engagement with the community. That did not happen because we were hit by COVID. The projections on the revenue that was supposed to be coming in from car rental tax and lodgers tax that was going to cover the, you know, the debt on the bonds for the first and second phase of buildings, it just didn't materialize. So the revenue projections were totally off. And so the city backed away from moving forward with the P3 approach to how to get those buildings built, and then sort of, you know, have kind of punted, if you will, the redevelopment of the Coliseum site until they fully engage the community in that process and look at, you know, what are some of those benefits that the community wants to see on the property. Now, I want to go back for a second and talk just briefly about the 1909 building, which is the oldest historic building on the campus. And there was a commitment to save the building and to renovate it. And that is one of the buildings on the ballot. That is proposed to be a public market. And there was a huge public engagement process that not only included GES neighborhood residents, but the broader sort of food industry, if you will, to look at, should a public market just be about food? Should it be about, so many other things? And National Western Authority engaged Aaron, I'm forgetting his last name, but he is the principal that ran Pike's Market for many, many years in Seattle. And since he left, he has consulted with cities all around the globe about how you make a public market successful. And so a lot of the commitments in that study that talked about it has to be local, your products have to be local, both food as well as any of the other goods that are being sold. And that's again where there are incredible entrepreneurial opportunities for residents to participate in that. And so they will be part of helping to shape, working with the National Western Authority, what that governance structure is going to look like. I mean, I would venture to guess you would want to continue to include some of the folks that have tried to close the gap on farm to table. One of the commitments, is, and this has happened with most other public markets, they create the opportunity for people who have SNAP benefits to go buy their produce, their food at some of these. And in this neighborhood, in these 3 neighborhoods, it's a food desert. I mean, they don't have and have not enjoyed the benefit of some of the community assets that most of our neighborhoods enjoy. A grocery store, some of your shopping markets that have, a barber shop, a bakery, some of the basics that people look for in a neighborhood. So this will really close the gap on the food desert concern and make sure that people in the community have access to healthy food as well.
That's wonderful. I love food markets, so I always get very excited when I hear about them. Is the idea that because it's indoors, that it would be open year round, that it would be a daily?
That is what is anticipated. Yes. And it could lend itself to, during good weather, to have other activities. I mean, you potentially could bring in, music and entertainment and some of those kinds of things that are often attached to some of the public markets that exist around the country.
That's fantastic. No, it's very exciting. So this is really connected to, I guess, what we've already been talking about. But why is the redevelopment of the National Western? The question is why is the redevelopment of the National Western Center important to your business? But really, I mean, you represent Denverites at large. So why is why are you specifically involved in this? Why is it important to you and your constituency that the National Western Center is developing in this way?
For the same reason that 13 council members came together and signed a letter. It's a citywide asset that people, not only in Denver, but from throughout the state, come and enjoy during the annual stock show. And again, with the opportunity to have year-round activities, this presents itself to generate more revenue for the city. And in generating more revenue as a a place that brings people in that buy tickets and buy goods and food and beverage, that also generates revenue for the community. Because one of the commitments that was made, which I forgot to mention earlier when you asked the question, is what is being known as a community investment fund that would look at a roundup that is spelled out in the framework agreement. So you purchase something and you're asked if you want to round up to the nearest dollar, and that money is set aside and goes into a fund for the community. That is the floor. So in conversations that have already been happening with the neighborhood, they've been talking about other potential opportunities where National Western Campus can generate other revenues that go into that fund. And then the community gets to decide how that gets used. And they're not obligated to only look at how it could be spent on the campus, right? And the community collectively gets to decide, number one, what that governance structure is going to look like, and number two, how they're going to prioritize where those dollars go. For example, is housing the number one issue? And is it generating enough money to make a dent in housing? But creating some training opportunities so that entrepreneurs who may want to be in there, are given access and know what, the contracts may look like, somebody that can help educate them on, different aspects of all of that. So the community gets to decide what those kinds of issues are that they want in that, how that money gets spent.
That's fantastic. You've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'll read the question just in case there's additional things you'd like to talk about. But why do you think redeveloping this area will, what do you think redeveloping this area will mean to the future of Denver and also to the future of Colorado as a whole? Because this isn't just, as you mentioned earlier,
Right.
just it's in Denver, but it's got kind of expanding opportunities.
Well, I think part of it is the partnership with the other partners that make up the three legs of the stool, if you will, that is the National Western Authority, and what they can do collectively. But the other thing is this area of town has seen huge growth. And when I left office in 2003, Blueprint Denver had just been updated. And this area along the Brighton Boulevard corridor was known as a new growth area. And, the expectation was that a lot of the warehouse buildings that had been used for industrial businesses, some of that had declined, some of that business was moving to, other parts of the state. And it presented an opportunity for the city. So fast forward to today, most of that area is completely built out. And it's created the rooftops, if you will, that help justify the need to bring in a grocery store, to attract some of the other neighborhood serving businesses, some of which can exist on the Coliseum property. Now, I do have to say that, part of that is on a Superfund site and would need to be cleaned up, but so is Gates. So is the Shattuck site, and those have been cleaned up. And actually, Gates is, under construction right now. So it doesn't mean that just because, part of it is on a Superfund site that nothing can happen there, right? Because we've seen that all across, the state and across the country. So I think that in itself presents some opportunities for the community as well, to ensure that affordable housing is a big part of what could happen there. I'm not clear whether there would be housing north of I-70. I think most of it is anticipated to be on the south side, which is the Coliseum property. There's a really nice park, Globeville Landing Park, on the west side, abutting the river. There's a bike trail along there. So I think that the challenge we have is, how do we do all of this without seeing displacement of people who live in the neighborhood that want to stay in their housing, whether they're renters or whether they're homeowners? And what we've seen across, the city is, as neighborhoods develop, like the one I live in, property values go up. And if people are on a fixed income, it's hard to manage a budget and pay the increased price of taxes when you've got limited income just to remain in your household. So there have been lots of discussions about, how do we do that? How do we help keep people in the neighborhood And those will be part of the ongoing conversations as part of what happens with the 30 acres on the Coliseum property, and looking at any future build of that. I've been promised by the administration, the budget director, the finance director, that they're trying to find the money to do the planning process in this year's budget.
Wow.
So we potentially, just depending on, how much time there is as we get into holidays and all of that, and whether or not we're going to be doing meetings in person or virtually, given challenges with COVID. We potentially could start some of that this year and not wait until next year. It was anticipated in the document that the mayor and Councilwoman Gilmore, Council President Gilmore signed, was that we would start that process in 2022. And maybe part of it is we lay the groundwork for how that's going to move, who the consultant's going to be that will work with the neighborhood and with the city to begin to identify what some of those community benefits should be in the development of that 30-acre campus.
Great, thank you. So if we were, this seems like kind of an easy question. It's not. I'm not trying to trip you up or anything, but it's one I like to think of as kind of a reflection question, and that is, if we were to take a single photograph representing you and your constituency and its relationship to the National Western Center, past, present, or future, what would we see in that photo, and why would that be the photo that you would want representing that?
I think it's been somewhat of a tug and pull kind of relationship. The communities came out in support of the first bond package that went to the voters asking for funding to help build out phase 1 and phase 2 of the master plan. There have been more challenges now, and some of the arguments have been made that there were promises made that were not kept. Those buildings that are brand new, that were proposed to be built, are not even open yet. So the revenue generation will begin to happen in the 2022 season of National Western. They're going to start collecting the funds from the roundup. And again, that's just the floor. But that'll give them an idea of what that baseline looks like. And then they're looking at how to incorporate that into all the different events and activities that are going to take place on the campus. So there are some things yet to come to fruition. And I think as the community gets to see, number one, what that will generate, for National Western and the community to come together to look at what are the other opportunities to generate revenue for the community. How do we make sure there is affordable housing on the campus? And with the city owning the land, we should be able to demand more than what we expect of private developments where the land is owned by a private entity. So those are some of the things that are still yet to come. I think part of it is, people just have felt disconnected from it. And, we just have to work at making sure that that is a very strong working relationship between the 3 neighborhoods and National Western moving forward. And I know both sides are committed to that. And we all win and everybody benefits when that's done in a collaborative way.
Great, thank you. So that's the end of the formal questions. Is there anything specifically that we didn't talk about that you think is important for us to record and collect and understand?
I'm excited about what CSU's sort of agenda is for this campus. And I'm not sure I fully understand it all, but just knowing that Chancellor Frank is focused on solving world hunger is huge. And I mean, they've got some incredible programs and intend for this campus to really hone in on that. And I don't know how much you're in tune to the master plan, but one of the things that occurred as part of the construction is taking out what was known as the Delguini Interceptor, which were these huge pipes that were on the east side of the river that basically channeled all the waste down to Adams County to the waste recycling facility. And in doing the work to bury those, we're able to capture some energy from the waste processing. It's a waste to energy basically concept. And that in itself will be used to heat a lot of the buildings on the campus, which over time should significantly reduce a lot of the operating costs. So that's an example of some of the ingenuity and looking into the future about how do we do things, as we all know that we have to do our part in contributing to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and how we protect, Mother Earth so that we have an environment that will be here for future generations.
That's great. Thank you. So then this is my last question then for you. So a year from now, 18 months from now, I actually met with Dr. Frank yesterday. So I got to hear all of the cool things that CSU is doing. Buildings. And I asked him what would you do, once you're done with all of your official business and official attendance things and talks and things like that you need to do on the first day that things start to open up. After you're done with all the formal official stuff, what are you going to go out and do? Where are you going to head on the campus, and why do you want to do that?
Oh, you're asking me that question now.
I'm asking you that.
Okay, I thought you were saying that's the question you asked him.
Well, buildings, but you're kind of covering the whole campus. So in a year,
right.
so maybe reformulating the question a little bit so that, in a year from now, what do you want to see happening with the campus? What do you want? What are you envisioning for the campus a year from now or 18 months from now?
Well, I'm envisioning that the community is very much a part of what's happening on the campus, that we have year-round activities that engages the community where, they feel welcome on the campus. We're generating revenue, not only for the neighborhood, but for the city. And we've just got a thriving campus with lots of activities that is a destination attraction that people want to go to because they want to see what's happening over there. Now, one of the interesting challenges that we're going to see is not only what happens with the build out of the 30 acres at the Coliseum. Pepsi-Cola has, I met with them a couple months ago. They're moving to sell their property if they haven't already sold it. And that's another 30 acres adjacent to the Coliseum that could be redeveloped as well. And as you know, the zoning in that area allows some fairly high density. The Coliseum would have to be rezoned, so that's a separate process that the city and a developer would have to go through with the community. But there's the potential for a lot more activity and traffic and some opportunities and challenges yet to happen. But for the campus itself, I think just seeing people going back and forth on the light rail from both directions, people from the community taking advantage of some of the scholarships and having some of our young people be the very people working on the campus and helping solve some of these global issues. That's my vision, and it being just integrated into the fabric of the community where, it's flush that they're working hand in glove with one another.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us to close out? Otherwise, I won't take up any more of your time.
No, I mean, we've just had some incredible minds that have come together to envision this future place making, if you will, that is happening as we speak. And I don't know if you've been on the campus recently. I got a chance to take a tour about a month ago, and just to see how much has already transpired is pretty exciting. One of the challenges I think we have until the new arena is built, and hopefully the voters see the wisdom to pass that, there with strong support to keep National Western here. That creates, again, the opportunity for the year-round activities. And what we didn't talk about are different companies that get to benefit on the construction side. And we have a very strong commitment to a workforce, local hire component, as well as complying with all the city rules around hiring minority and women businesses. So those are some of the other benefits that will happen as a result of all of that moving forward. But until a new arena is built and the National Western Stock Show has to utilize the Coliseum, some of the buildings are a little further apart now. And so moving people traffic back and forth to the buildings is going to be an interesting challenge. And I'm sure they've been working on and thinking about how to do that. They have some different people movers. If you've ever gone to a stock show, some of them are, what look like open trailer is not the right word, but it's got seating and whatnot that helps move people from the parking lots to the buildings. But I'm really excited and looking forward to what that becomes in the future.
Great.
And I guess the last thing I would say is when you do these kinds of projects, it takes multiple years to bring them online. And when you have term limits, the commitment from one administration to a next administration, if you don't have enough things in motion to ensure that the commitments made to the public are in place to happen, there's question about whether or not some of these things will get done in the future. And so again, back to your question about a year, 18 months from now, that's one of the things I would want to make sure that we've got that solid commitment to as we have some new leadership that will be coming into this city.
Thank you so much for your time, Councilwoman. I so appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about this and to add your insight and wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.